Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are diving into a story that basically flips everything you thought you knew about building a massive business empire completely upside down. We're talking about a family who literally hid their first store on purpose. They refused to advertise, and they flat out rejected growth for 15 solid years. And yet, somehow, against all conventional business logic, they built a billion-dollar brand that totally reshaped the burger industry. So how exactly did they pull that off? Well, let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this brings us to the central strategic paradox of Five Guys. How does 15 years of near-zero growth actually build a billion-dollar empire? Right? In a fast food industry that is completely obsessed with rapid scaling, quick returns, and aggressive market domination, patience sounds like a guaranteed recipe for getting crushed by your competition. But, as we'll see throughout this explainer, for this specific family, patience wasn't complacency, it wasn't fear, it was a highly legitimate, fiercely calculated strategy.
Section 1. The College Fund Gamble.
So the year is 1986. We're in Arlington, Virginia. Jerry and Janie Murrell had been saving up for years to send their boys to school. But Jerry, a salesman with a deeply stubborn streak and some very strong opinions about hamburgers, asks his sons this crazy question. He says, "Do you want to go to college or start a business with me?" Well, the boys chose the business. And this number is what they started with. The family took their entire college fund, just under $70,000, and bet their whole safety net on a tiny local burger shop. But the specific location they chose tells you absolutely everything about how this family operates.
It perfectly illustrates their mindset. They deliberately picked a low-visibility location, no automatic foot traffic to artificially prop them up. Jerry's logic was honestly almost scientific. He believed that if you strip away all the convenience, well then every single person who walks through that door is undeniable proof that the product is actually worth the effort. They named the shop for the men of the family, Five Guys.
Section 2. The Fanatical Product Formula.
Right from day one, Jerry believed that a simple product executed perfectly will always beat a complicated menu executed averagely. The food literally had to be the marketing. Now, what's truly fascinating here is just how dogmatic they were about these rules. The menu was almost comically simple. Burgers, fries, hot dogs, that's it. For years, they absolutely refused to add milkshakes, drive-thrus, or delivery. Patties were hand-formed from fresh beef, massive portions of fries were cut fresh every single morning and cooked only in peanut oil. And crucially, they spent $0 on advertising. Zero! Instead, they took that entire marketing budget and pumped it directly into generous secret shopper bonuses for their crews just to ensure absolute perfection.
The contrast here is just staggering. While conventional chains were racing each other to the bottom, using frozen patties, shrinking their portions, fighting endless discount wars, Five Guys was doing the exact opposite. And that wild bet on a hidden, zero-foot traffic location, it paid off exactly as designed. Word of mouth found the shop, lines started forming out the door, and Washingtonians began treating Five Guys burgers like this heavily guarded local secret that was just too good not to share.
Section 3. 15 years refusing growth.
Now, this is the part of the story that almost never happens in American business. This was an era where the Murrell family seemingly left tens of millions of dollars just sitting on the table. Over the next 15 years, as the fast food burger boom was minting fortunes all around them, the Murrells opened a grand total of 5 stores. Yep, just 5. All in the D.C. metro area and all run personally by family members. Think about that for a second. That is an agonizingly slow pace of opening just one new store every 3 years. And to be completely clear, this wasn't an inability to grow. This was a strict, unbending policy.
If you took this to a traditional business school, they would flag these flat years as a massive opportunity cost, right? A total failure to capitalize on surging demand. But Jerry kept resisting his son's repeated pushes to franchise. Why? Well, because to Jerry, handing his kitchens over to strangers meant handing over his reputation. He believed that just one bad franchisee serving a soggy fry could burn down everything the family had spent decades building. To him, growth wasn't a prize, it was a severe risk. You only take that risk when you are absolutely certain your quality can scale right alongside it.
Section 4. The book that changed everything.
So eventually the sons had to find a way to crack through 2 whole decades of their father's stubborn resistance. How do you do that? Well, they built their case methodically, in the only way a guy like Jerry would respect, operationally. First, they ran the stores themselves, proving those unbending standards could be maintained.
Second, they proved the operational systems could hold up even without their dad physically standing at the grill. And finally, the absolute masterstroke. They handed him a literal copy of Franchising for Dummies. I know, it sounds crazy. Handing a stubborn burger man a For Dummies book is bold. But here's the brilliant part. It was co-written by Dave Thomas, the founder of Wendy's. Because it came from Dave Thomas, a man who actually built a national burger empire on franchised kitchens, it worked. The combination of their flawless track record and testimony from someone Jerry actually respected finally broke the dam. In early 2003, Jerry agreed to franchise.
Talk about metric whiplash. The family business that grew by just 5 stores in 15 years suddenly exploded. Within about 18 months, more than 300 franchise territories were sold. 300. Why? Because business people up and down the East Coast had been eating at those original 5 stores for a decade and a half. There was an absolute volcano of pent-up demand. They had literally been waiting years for the chance to own one.
Section 5. Patience as a strategy.
So the crucial point is that when they finally did expand, they didn't compromise an inch. Because their franchising contracts strictly enforced those fanatical standards, the fresh beef, the fresh-cut fries, the absolute no freezers rule, the quality that Jerry had guarded for so long successfully survived the massive scaling he had always feared. Let's move to this timeline and see how it builds. In 1986, it's just a tiny shop funded by a risky tuition gamble. By 2001, it is stubbornly maintained at just 5 family-run stores. Then, 2003 hits, the franchise gates open, and boom. Today, they operate well over 1,000 locations globally. Their fan base includes presidents and celebrities, and they generate revenues measured in the billions. This visually proves that the caution and the boom weren't opposites. Actually, one purchased the other.
When you really break down their counterintuitive strategies, the genius becomes super clear. Zero ad spend meant slower initial discovery, sure, but the long-term payoff was a fiercely loyal cult following who felt like they had discovered a secret. Those 15 years of flat growth, yeah, they left tens of millions on the table initially, but it gave them a flawless, battle-tested operational blueprint. And those insanely strict franchise terms definitely made the initial setup harder for partners, but it ensured that legendary quality survived a 1,000-store scale. Five Guys' slowness was actually the ultimate form of quality control in disguise.
None of this happens if the Murrells just make the safe choice and mail those tuition checks back in 1986. And none of it happens if they let a hidden 0-foot traffic storefront convince them that their idea was too fragile to test honestly. The whole story proves that patience and unyielding standards are a highly effective strategy. Which brings us to a really crucial question. If the biggest leaps usually start with the smallest, shakiest first steps, what invisible foundation are you building right now? Remember, starting small, even if it feels completely invisible, is still starting. If this explainer got you thinking about your own foundations, stick around and engage with the channel. We absolutely love unpacking real stories of people who just started, long before the world gave them permission to. Thanks so much for joining us, and I'll see you in the next explainer.